Room 217. She dropped out of college, 7 months pregnant, no home, no family. He said, "This isn't my problem." Then she fainted at her shift. Woke up in room 217, a nurse's note taped to the IV pole. "Rest, I've got your shift. Hi everyone, welcome to the Pillow Files. Let's get started." Naomi Tugwell had never imagined life would take such a sharp turn at 21. As a third-year nursing student, she had always been top of her class, studying long nights at the University Library, volunteering at free clinics, and dreaming of opening a small women's health center in her hometown one day. She had materialized those plans on a well-worn notebook page. A modest brick building, posters about prenatal care on the walls, and her own gentle voice guiding patients through their darkest moments. If someone had told her 6 months ago that she would find herself on the opposite end, alone, pregnant, and desperate, she would have scoffed. Yet here she was. She first realized something was wrong when her period did not arrive. She had chalked it up to stress. Juggling 3 clinical rotations, working the late-night shift at the student clinic, and volunteering at a local women's shelter left her body overtired. But when she missed 2 cycles in a row, that nagging anxiety in her chest demanded an answer. At dawn one Saturday, in the cramped, messy bathroom of her university dorm room, she sank to her knees beside the toilet. Her hands shook as she fumbled for the small plastic pregnancy test she had stashed in her drawer. The tiny pink line that appeared a few minutes later felt like a sword through her heart. She thought of immunity charts, sterile lab coats, the pride her mother had felt when she accepted her acceptance letter for nursing school. Thought of how deeply she had worked to ensure nothing could derail her path. But in that moment, her entire trajectory collapsed. The father was a classmate, Caleb Winters, a second-year student in the psychology program. They had met at a fundraising event for the campus mental health initiative. He was kind and supportive at first, his dark eyes sympathetic when she told him. For exactly 1 week, he offered a shoulder to cry on, a gentle voice in her ear during late-night phone calls and brief hospital visits, promising to stand by her. Then, almost as swiftly as he had appeared, he recoiled. "I'm not ready for this," he had said one afternoon, voice hollow, as they sat on a battered sofa in the student lounge. "This isn't my life to ruin. I have my own plans." The words crashed over her like a wave, and a cold button of dread lodged itself in her chest. Naomi had no parents to call. Her mother had died in a car crash when Naomi was 12. After that, foster care whisked her from one impersonal home to another, each placement a temporary arrangement, each rule another reminder that she did not truly belong. Somewhere between 5th grade and her high school graduation, she learned to fend for herself. College had been her lifeline, a chance to build something stable, to create space for someone even smaller than herself, the child growing inside her. She had refused to consider termination at first. Her ethics, her budding identity as a nurse, and her unwavering belief that every life deserved a chance. But as days passed, her bank account dwindled. She sold her laptop to cover her next dorm fee, scraped by on canned beans and rice, and started picking up extra shifts at the student clinic, skipping lectures to work. Her grades began to slide. Professors sent her concerned emails she did not open. When the dean learned she was behind on tuition and pregnant, his solution was blunt: withdraw voluntarily. She did, because she had no choice. Left without housing or a student ID, she ended up at the Good Shepherd Women's Shelter, an old converted funeral home that smelled faintly of floor wax and antiseptic. The hallway lights burned from dusk until dawn, and she shared a cramped room with 2 other expectant mothers, each clutching a stack of medical books. She kept her folder of ultrasound scans and lab results tucked into her stretched backpack, and she clutched a tattered copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting, as though it were a lifeline. At 7 months pregnant, her body ached constantly. Her hips protested every step. Her back throbbed, and she awoke at night to scuffles of hunger in her stomach. Yet she worked the only job she could find, manning the overnight register at the 24-hour Stanton Gas and Mart. The fluorescent lights hummed, the aisles lay half-lit, and she watched the clock tick toward her shift's end as if each second were an eternity. One night, around midnight, she stooped to pick up a can of soup that someone had dropped by the condiment rack. The next thing she remembers is waking up in a hospital bed, her head foggy, her vision blurry. She felt the heaviness of IV lines in both arms, the scratchy hospital gown, and a rough voice. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open to fluorescent strips overhead, squeaking wheelchairs in the hall, and a small placard above the door. 2 to 17. She blinked twice. A cup of tea, still steaming, sat on a bedside table. A folded blanket was tucked around her shoulders. She touched her arm, felt the plastic of the hospital ID bracelet. The pain in her head felt dull, yet her mind raced with questions. What had happened? Why was she here? A single sheet of paper was taped to her IV stand. In neat handwriting, 5 words that felt like a promise. "Rest, I've got your shift," and signed, "Jess, night nurse." She stared at it as though it were a hallucination. It couldn't be real. In the past months, no one beyond a disinterested caseworker had offered her any kindness. Her phone lay in her purse, dead. There were no messages, no family to call. She pressed her fingers to the note and felt a curious tremor. A brittle bud of relief. Over the next hour, she drifted back in and out of sleep. When she woke again, a tall woman in scrubs stood beside her, bed, holding a plastic container of applesauce. "Hey, you're awake," the nurse said, setting the container on the overbed table. She wore a silver bracelet with a tiny charm, a stethoscope molded in metal. "Name's Jess. I covered your shift last night." Her tone was matter-of-fact, as though trading shifts was ordinary, except no one had ever done that for Naomi before. "Thank you," Naomi croaked. Her throat felt raw. Jess offered a small, kind smile. "No problem. You hit your head pretty hard. You fainted at the register. Lucky we have a hospital 2 blocks from that gas station." She glanced at the chart clipped to the foot of the bed. "You're about 30 weeks. How are you feeling otherwise?" Naomi hesitated briefly before admitting, "Hungry, tired, and a little scared." Jess nodded sympathetically. "Understandable. How about some apple juice? I'll be your nurse. Tonight. I'll check on you every few hours." She paused. "Also, I left some emergency Medicaid forms at the desk if you want to apply." Naomi blinked. I didn't know they still did that." Jess shrugged. "You never asked. But I'd hate for you to leave here with a bill you can't pay. If you need anything, just press the call button." Days blurred together as Naomi recovered enough to be discharged. The shelter assigned her a small corner cubicle upon her return, an upgrade at least from the dorm-style bunk room she'd shared. She applied for Medicaid, braiding her hair absently as she filled out forms in the shelter's break area. The phone lines hummed, the fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead, and she breathed deep when she saw that her application was approved within 48 hours. Jess stopped by the shelter each evening after her shift at the hospital, bearing brown paper sacks, a grilled cheese sandwich, maybe a hard-boiled egg, or a handful of granola bars. They never talked about Jess's personal life, only that her father had died when she was 16. Her mother had raised 2 siblings alone, and somehow felt like everything had come full circle when she saved that fainting pregnant woman. They exchanged knowing smiles as they shared simple meals on a battered cafeteria table. Jess helped Naomi line up a social worker appointment for new parenting classes. She even tracked down a local church volunteer named Mrs. Albright, who donated a second-hand crib. White paint peeling, in patches, but sturdy enough for a newborn. "Name her after someone you love," Mrs. Albright told Naomi as she wheeled the crib through that shelter hallway. "Names have power." Naomi clutched her folder of medical notes, up-to-date ultrasound images, her own scribbles on baby, growth charts, and a note from the obstetrician explaining her high blood pressure. She stared at the massive crib, Then she said softly, "Hope. I'll name her Hope." As autumn deepened, Naomi's belly grew heavy. She felt kicks against her ribs when she shifted in bed, reminding her of the life within. Every ultrasound glance confirmed a small, wrinkled form. A girl, judging by a technician's careful gaze, and an unspoken shared nod with Jess. The night, Jess told her they were having a daughter. Naomi stayed up until dawn, imagining small pink outfits, tiny socks, and the sound of a newborn's cry. When the day of delivery, December 3rd, arrived, Naomi's contractions began at dawn. Her water broke in the middle of the night, and she called Jess's extension at the maternity ward frantically. Jess arrived within 20 minutes, slipping into the driver's seat of her Toyota with a car seat already installed. She whispered words of encouragement to Naomi as they sped across town, white lights flashing in the pre-dawn gloom. On the delivery table, when the baby finally emerged, tiny, red-skinned, and screaming as if she already knew the world was cruel, Naomi's eyes blurred with tears. She cradled her daughter on her chest. The infant's head was covered in dark, wispy hair. Her fists tightened and relaxed in a perfect undulation of new life. Tears streamed down Naomi's cheeks as the baby sucked on her first formula bottle. "Hope," Naomi whispered, her lips trembling. "You're my hope." Jess hovered nearby, smiling broadly, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. She held the infant blanket as a small trophy, like a promise kept. "She's perfect," Jess said, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from Naomi's brow. "You did amazing." During the next several days in room 217, the nurses rotated shifts, care for mother and baby. Carmel, the charge nurse, taught Naomi how to swaddle Hope and assess her temperature. They showed her how to burp a tiny body, how to look for early jaundice, and how to keep her daughter's umbilical cord stump clean. Each night, Jess slipped a tray of food onto the table in Naomi's room. Vegetable soup, a boiled egg, a granola bar, always accompanied by a quick hug and an encouraging word. On the third night, Naomi finally managed a full night's sleep, her first since 7 months pregnant, lulled by Hope's steady breathing. When she awoke, sunlight poured through the window, illuminating Hope's small, delicate face. She felt a profound sense of relief. The future was still unsettled, the bills still looming, but for this moment, she held her daughter in a clean hospital crib. And all that mattered was that they were alive, together. Before discharge, Naomi walked down to the hospital's social services office, her freshly laundered hospital gown tucked into a backpack, along with Hope's blanket and a bag of outfits provided by the hospital nursery. A counselor named Ms. Stewart handed her a folder with program referrals, a free parenting class at the community centre, a voucher for baby formula, and a list of rent assistance charities. "You did everything right," Ms. Stewart told her. "You asked for help when you needed it. That's a sign of strength." Naomi nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "Thank you. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without Nurse Jess." Ms. Stewart's eyebrows rose. "Jess? She's one of our best. She's been checking on you all week. Doesn't look for thanks. Just likes to know she's made a difference." Later that day, Naomi and Hope finally left room 217. Jess was waiting at the doorway, cell phone in hand, and the donated crib dismantled in her trunk. She handed Naomi a small cardboard box. Baby clothes donated by her church, a blanket embroidered, with pastel flowers and a stack of diapers. "Here," she said, "just until you get settled." Naomi's throat felt thick. She opened her jacket to cradle Hope, who gurgled softly. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just take care of this little one," Jess replied, "and when you're ready, consider volunteering here. Maybe share your story with other mums in the shelter. Pay it forward." Naomi wiped her eyes. "I will, I promise." For the next week, Naomi and Hope stayed at a maternity transitional housing facility run by the same shelter. She enrolled in a night caregiver job training program and a community college's evening nursing assistant course. Every day, she brought Hope to the on-site daycare, safe, warm, and near her dorm room she hadn't yet reclaimed. Jess visited often, dropping off groceries, fresh vegetables, fruit, eggs, and baby formula. Sometimes they met in the shelter's common room, where Jess sat across from Naomi, ready to listen to her fears about rent, childcare, and finding a part-time job that could accommodate a newborn. They laughed softly when Hope cooed, tiny hands waving at the ceiling. One evening, after Hope's feeding, Naomi confided, "I'm scared. Without my scholarship, I can't return to nursing school full-time. I don't have time to work a full schedule and care for her." She passed a folded sheet of paper across the table, an acceptance letter for a part-time scholarship at a local nursing program. "It's not the same. It's a certificate, not a degree." Jess read it carefully. She folded it back, meeting Naomi's gaze. "It's a start. Let it be a stepping stone. Look, hospitals need CNAs and LVNs more than ever. Once you have that, you can work during the day, take evening classes when you can, and slowly rebuild." Naomi nodded, tears prickling her eyes. "I want to do more than rebuild. I want to open my clinic one day for women like me, single mums, survivors, anyone who needs care without a judgmental look." Jess smiled gently. "And you will. Start small, one step at a time. You already saved yourself and your daughter." Weeks turned into months. Naomi's life settled into a painstaking routine. Daytime CNA classes, evening shifts at the daycare center where she had once volunteered, and weekends at the community clinic handing out pamphlets about prenatal vitamins. Hope grew quickly, bright blue eyes, a gene from her mother's side, and a soft curl of dark hair. She learned to smile almost as soon as her chubby cheeks could hold the shape. Each milestone filled Naomi with wonder. First laugh, first roll, first attempt at sitting unsupported. One chilly April morning, Naomi walked into Stanton Medical Center as a certified nursing assistant, badge clipped to her scrub pocket. The Yayama lobby's bright sunlight cast patterns on the marble floor. A fellow CNA greeted her by name, and she introduced herself to new co-workers. Her heart fluttered. She had made it back into a hospital setting, one step closer to nursing school. She had a long road ahead, loans to repay, evening classes to juggle, childcare to arrange. But for the first time in nearly a year, she believed those burdens were surmountable. At her first break, she stepped into the hospital's quiet chapel, a small haven of pews and stained glass. She took off her badge and gently laid it on the wooden pew. She closed her eyes, lifting Hope's picture, a small photograph affixed to her lanyard. "Thank you," she whispered, her breath catching. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." As she stepped out of the chapel, a soft voice called her name. "Naomi?" She turned to find Jess, now wearing navy blue scrubs. A different unit, a promotion. She cradled her own infant granddaughter in her arms, swaddled in pink. "Thought I'd find you here. Look what I brought." Naomi's heart swelled. She knelt, offering her arms to the little girl, whose eyes flickered open and regarded her with curious lashes. "She's stunning," Naomi breathed. She kissed the tiny head, freckles of lanugo still faint on the cheeks. "Just like her, Mama." Jess smiled, handing the baby to Naomi. "Welcome to room 217, the land of miraculous recoveries." They laughed softly as Hope's big blue eyes locked onto her new cousin. Naomi felt tears sting her vision, tears of gratitude, of relief, of a future she had once believed impossible. She looked up at Jess. "I don't know where I'd be without you." Jess stroked her shoulder. "You'd still be here, making it work. But I'm glad I could help." Naomi nodded, hugging the baby close. She glanced down at Hope, now sleeping, peacefully in her arms. "I couldn't have asked for a better miracle." Jess stood, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "That's why we're here, to be miracles for each other, one small act of kindness at a time." They walked out of the chapel together, two nurses, two mothers, Two survivors of their own battles, united by a quiet vow to keep paying kindness forward. And in the soft spring light, as petals drifted across the hospital courtyard, Hope giggled in her mother's arms, a tiny spark of new life lighting the horizon of a once shattered future. Love this story? Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that reveal the quiet power of kindness. Don't forget to check out the video currently on your screen. You won't want to miss what happens when a single moment changes everything. See you in the next one.